Yes.
48-hour art check, round 127. All right.
Yeah.
So we
127 of these things, right?
yes, that is many. Much,
Yes.
much many.
Yes.
Got to turn Scott's logo on there because we got Scott here today as well.
Hey guys.
So yeah, so let's jump in. Scott, what have you gotten done in the last 48 hours here?
Okay, since I'm only on once a week, I might go back a little more than that, but
It always makes you look more productive than us.
yeah.
That's
Well,
true.
actually, no. I'm just going to talk for the accomplishments. I'm just going to talk about the past 2 days, which is basically as usual the video and everything for the 100 days update. Posting that. I also posted a Facebook video trying to promote the Kickstarter. Um, I actually, I don't want to say I launched a Patreon because I just basically signed up for it because I was watching the video that Jason Brubaker put out, and I guess they're going to raise their tiers, so I had to kind of get in there. So I have a Patreon now, but it's right now it's just kind of a placeholder. I don't have any uh, are they called tiers? I don't know, whatever they're called, set up. Um, but I put that all together, so I'm hopefully in the position where I'll get grandfathered in. And then but most of what I'm doing has just been freelance. I've got a lot of freelance stuff that I'm trying to get finished before I head out of town next week.
Cool.
Nice.
And yeah, I heard about that Patreon thing. I had one from forever ago, but it's been inactive. I wonder if you have to have backers or I don't
I
know,
don't
just
think
having an
so.
account.
So I'm not sure.
Josh, how about you?
Yeah, so far I have inked one panel, the first panel for this page on quarterly stories, and then by the time we're done with this, I should be done with the second panel. So it's been one of those long days where this is the first time I've been able to get to my art table. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's pretty much what I've gotten done so far, thus far, and that is interesting about Patreon. So just to clarify, they're upping their tiers. What does
Oh no,
that
I
mean?
guess I explained that wrong. The percentages that Patreon takes, they're breaking it off into like two separate plans. One of them has more, but they take more. I don't know. I didn't look into it that much. I just kind of was like, oh, I better do this now. So, but it looked like they're going to break it up into two different plans you can sign up as. And
Interesting.
so, yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
I read through the whole thing. It actually seemed pretty reasonable whether you're in early or whether you're in afterwards. I think mainly it's something if you've got, you're making, buku bucks every month, it'll affect it differently there, but it didn't seem like it seemed like a small change for the smaller guys like us, so
Okay.
but I don't know.
Nevertheless.
I read it. I read it because I got an announcement because I've been on Patreon for a while. I just have an inactive. Like I just don't push it, and I think people could back me, but I don't ever put anything on there right now. So, but I read it when it came out, and I remember thinking, yeah, that seems reasonable. I can't remember what the details were though.
Nice.
Yeah,
What about you, Corey? So what did you get done?
barely anything. I have been unconscious for most of the last 48 hours, and basically, I wanted to have done a full-on animatic on this thing, and all I got is the storyboards. And so, um, yeah, I kind of roughed a bunch of stuff out, and I broke it up into pieces. There's layers to this, and it looks less complicated than it is, but still, it doesn't represent like a full 48 hours worth of effort because I have been just really sick and kind of in cough syrup induced comas trying to get better. So spent most of
Yeah.
today just being kind of like dizzy and trying not to fall over, stuff like that. So it's hard to focus on anything.
Yeah, I'm impressed honestly that you got storyboards done. Or like boarded it basically because that's a rough thing, man. So you failed at your plan to get better.
Yes, I did. But I did
But
also go to the
I don't think we can.
doctor, got a haircut. So
Sweet.
tried
Yeah,
to move the ball forward. I had to call in sick today, which I hate doing that. It's really annoying, but it couldn't be helped. So
no, it's definitely that's definitely something you can't hold against yourself. It's just it's out of your control.
yeah, the fact that we're human, it just bothers me.
Yep,
The fallibility of who we are. Anyway.
I know. One day.
So yeah, right. So Scott, what were some challenges?
Oh, well, I wasn't sick, but I had all the challenges. Let's see. So this one I am going to kind of go back because like last week was like crazy, insane, not good. But I did on my video, I talked about it and talked about I need to be better at handling this kind of stuff because a lot of times there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. And I was just so frustrated. And in the end, I just got to like, what can you do? So anyway, let's see. If you follow me on Facebook, you may know that I put up a video talking about Facebook's algorithm and their community guidelines. Basically, and I didn't know why, but I started posting these. I'm spending all these time editing all these videos and everything to post to kind of promote the Kickstarter. And Facebook's telling me that they're against the community standards, and I don't know why. And I'm going, well, I use some of the YouTube music. Maybe I can't use YouTube music on Facebook. So I changed the music. I thought, well, maybe I said something. I recorded the audio. I thought, well, maybe just the fact that I'm drawing zombies are too violent. So I tried to use a less violent zombie. And all this time, I'm like, yeah, but like the people post Walking Dead stuff all the time and all that. It just doesn't make any sense. And finally, and this is Instagram too, and I'm getting these alerts saying, I'm trying to respond to people's posts, and it says, "Sorry, you can't post. You have you have a link that's in violation." I didn't quite put two and two together until this is going on pretty much the whole week.
Yeah.
And what it ended up was the name of my comic, Young and the Dead, is in violation of their terms of service because Young and Dead is not good. And robots think that I'm some kind of serial killer or something. I don't know. But anyway, so I finally figured it out and I changed things around, and then I just posted that video, which, man, it got shared quite a bit. I was kind of surprised. Probably more shares than I've ever had. So it's kind of a interesting video, but I don't know how much it helped the Kickstarter at all. But it might have got a few backers. But so anyway, so I was just basically kind of dealing with that, and then I had a pretty large check from a client that got charged back, and I'm like, and I had already sent out some bills. I'm like, oh, okay, I got to take care of this, but I took care of that. I was going to buy an iPad, and maybe because of the bank account thing and all this other stuff, like it was saying that I couldn't because there was some kind of a hold placed on my card.
Oh,
And
no.
so I went down to the bank, and they said, well, it doesn't show a hold, but it says that there's something. I forgot what the term was, but you got to call them. So I had to go back and be on hold for an hour trying to get that all straightened out. And then what else? And then I'm trying to get ready for Creative South, and got my business cards, and they're all totally messed up. Nothing is centered. It's like, so I've been going back and forth with them, and I don't know if you can see the design, but there's like a little, let's see.
I see it at the top.
So it's off,
Yeah.
but they're basically telling me they can't do a border like this. So I had to redesign it because they said that it's too complicated for them. So
come on.
yeah. So anyway, so hopefully I'll get those back before the conference. So I got that. And had to redesign all those cards and everything. And yeah, my Kickstarter is actually going backwards now.
Oh no!
I lost like $250. I had some big tier people that backed at big tiers that backed out. So, and which, you know the situation, maybe they came into hard times or whatever, but it's like, you're hoping your Kickstarter is going to keep going up and not backwards. So I don't know, but just all that kind of stuff. But
well, normally you hope it goes up and doesn't plateau. It hadn't even occurred to me that it would go backwards.
Yeah, it's going backwards now. So, but what can you do? And it's already funded, and I knew kind of going into it, I probably, as much as I'm trying to promote it and all these other issues, whether it's just me launching on the day that Facebook and Instagram crash, or having a week where I can't post things because I'm in violation of some stupid terms of services that have no, it's really not any kind of violation when you look at, my comic is pretty, I don't want to say it's family friendly, but if you're okay with letting your kids watch Goonies and stuff, then there's, nothing too bad about mine. But anyway, so yeah, just all that stuff. I wasn't, but what I was getting at was when I launched the Kickstarter, I kind of knew that I've got things coming up and that I just had this small window to launch it. I probably wouldn't be able to promote it or concentrate as much. And originally my attitude was, well, I just put it up there, and the main goal is kind of just to fund. But you kind of hope it'll do a little better. But in the end, it'll get out there, and it'll help me pay for the copies of the book, which is good. I don't know if there'll be much extra, but that's all right. That's the way it is. It's not over yet either. I've got tomorrow. I think I'm going to be on Jeff Lafferty's Artcast, and then I've got another thing with Dave Cumbo coming up. So I'm just going to try to do a little promotion, get the word out, but that's kind of where it is right now.
Wow. That's a rough bit of challenges, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I do think that there's a couple lessons in there for anyone out there. This is just has been my experience is generally if something can go wrong in print, it will go wrong in print. So just what you were mentioning with the business cards, when you order business cards, anybody out there who hasn't ordered them, plan for that. Plan that they're going to come in and not be right. I
could have paid for expedited shipping. I kind of because I went with overnight prints, and if I needed to, I can get them overnight. But the faster, the more it costs. And I figured if I can get them a week before, then I'd be okay. So I think they're going to try to turn them around fast because they kind of messed up. But so hopefully I'll get them in time.
Yeah, that's terrible.
But I can't hand them to people. There's no way. I wouldn't even want to say, look, the printer messed up. This is all I have. I don't know why I want to do that. It just doesn't look bad, especially when you're a designer. But
yeah.
So
at a design conference. So
I'm trying to figure out what to do with all these things.
So Josh, how about you? Challenges?
Mine have just been more kind of just navigating the balance of the day job with this comic, and then also just kind of fighting the urge to just rush it and get it done, because I know if I take my time and do it right, I'm gonna be really happy with the results. But it's as it gets closer and closer to finished, it's tempting to just do stick figures for the last 5 pages or whatever, So that's been an interesting challenge. But the main thing has just been trying to retain that balance and work on kind of almost mindfulness for work and for personal projects, because it's really easy when you're kind of piling the plate really high to get kind of stressed. And so that's something I've been trying to really kind of roll with. But I will say one challenge that's done is taxes. And, I don't know why. I think it's because maybe I took less freelance, but it's the lowest taxes I've ever had in 15 years.
To pay or to get back?
To pay. But it was a joke. It was I've never had a year where I didn't write 3 zeros at the minimum at the end of that, I owe the government. And this one, it's it was 2 numbers, both checks.
That's awesome.
Which is crazy. So it's to me, I'm like that. Like that was a huge relief because I was expecting to get kind of mauled with taxes this year. But luckily, I think it worked out. So that's kind of I don't know. It's like that's one real highlight and relief because that's usually April's one of the scariest times for like my wife and I like every year. Partially because freelance fluctuates so much, you can't really accurately pay your estimates, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that was a really like big relief. Yeah. Anyhow, so
That's
challenge.
awesome.
That's a challenge that's gone. But yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, along those lines, my son has a birth certificate now, so we can move on to the next step of giving him a social security number, which will allow us then to file our taxes. So we're like stepping closer and closer to get our taxes. Challenges mainly for me as I've been unconscious for most of the weekend. And so it's sleeping in chairs, reclining chairs, because if I lay all the way down, I just end up coughing all night, stuff like that. Been really tired. I'll walk up the stairs and have to like sit down because I'm winded and like dizzy. So just all that. So I haven't got a ton done, and on and on and on. And you can just for example, in this show, if you see me suddenly get up and run, I'm running to the bathroom. That's where I'm going, and I don't mind saying that publicly. That's fine. We all have these times, but that's what's going on. So it's not like I've been offended or that I have something better to do. I just have something more urgent that is calling at the moment. So we'll see. See how that goes. There's a challenge that you guys get to see live, or at least see the beginning of live. So yeah. Scott Victor in the chat is asking if you're doing Phoenix Fan Fusion this year.
Yes, I am. I didn't get invited as a guest, which is I was kind of bummed out because I was last year, but yeah, I will be there.
Cool.
Is Victor local? Is he in Phoenix?
I'm not sure. I'm sure he'll tell us in the chat.
I'm guessing if he asked, he probably is.
Yeah. So, so who wants to? Josh, do you want to introduce today's topic, or do you want me to kick it off and then you jump in with it, or?
Sure, I can introduce it. So, today's topic is self-discipline, and so the reason this topic kind of came to my mind was the other day I was talking to someone, and it was in regards to like their kind of desire to like work out and stuff, and this is a person I've talked to before who like wanted to write and kind of had trouble with like self-discipline with writing, and has just in general had trouble with self-discipline. I was like, well, I'm just not self-disciplined like you. Most people aren't like that. And it kind of got on my nerves. Because I was like...
And you have a podcast, so now you get to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, because it just kind of gets under my skin a little bit, because I don't think I'm all that different from other people. I think that's why it's called self-discipline, because it's not an easy thing to do, and really it's just a matter of like making windows of time where you don't have them, and then just committing to doing something, and just being really hardcore about committing to do it. I don't think that's some unusual skill. Like I think it's something that you can grow in yourself, and I think it's something you kind of have to like really fight to build. But I don't think at least as far as I understand it, I don't think it's really like an unnatural ability that some people have and some people don't. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought it would be an interesting topic. Maybe that would be a beginning part, is like, do you think it's something that's innate in someone, like the ability to have self-discipline, or do you think it's something that's trained, you know?
So I'll jump in on this because I have very strongly held opinions on it. I find it exceptionally frustrating when people assume that somebody is working hard because they are motivated, as if motivation precedes hard work. Because I've always said that motivation follows work. So the reason somebody is motivated is because they've done it, they've reaped the benefits of it, and they want to get those benefits again, and so they continue that cycle. But it doesn't start with motivation. It starts with work, and then motivation follows that work. And I think that is like just part of this life on this planet. Like, however you want to look at it, whether it's a biological imperative, whether it's, some sort of, divine, motivational thing or whatever. I don't think that nature is set up in such a way to reward things that didn't have any effort. Like, if you look at like the laws, of physics, like everything happens because, there was a force that caused it to move or caused it to stop or whatever. And so that whole concept of like, well, this person is motivated and thus they do something, I think is innately flawed, because I think they are motivated because they do something. And so it sounds slightly counterintuitive, but really the only thing that you have to do to become motivated to do something is to begin doing that thing until you reap the benefit, and then just do that thing no matter what. The motivation will come because you'll become a person who does that thing. And so if you are a person who does that thing, then people see that and they assume motivation, but that motivation is there because of the action, not to cause that action. So I think motivation is a result, not a catalyst. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you. I was kind of having a conversation with my dad over the phone, because I brought this up before, where he's like, "Oh, have you found a job yet?" I'm like, "Well, I kind of have the job. It's my own company. I'm working, So I kind of just laid it on the line. I said, "Dad, it's not the same as it was when you were." I said, "How many jobs have I had where I worked like 3 years tops, and then they just get laid off or whatever?" I was telling him the only real way to have any kind of security is kind of what you make for yourself, at least in my business. So, and I just kept going on, and I was talking about how I wish I would have been a little more. I would have started learning more. I mean, I've always run the business, but it just seems to me it hasn't really been until recently that I really got more involved in how to, just get better at the whole business part of it. And I said, I just wish I would have learned that before. And part of it wasn't available because now, before it was a little harder because the internet wasn't so prevalent. So now, I mean, you can, anything you want, you can find, anything you want to learn, you can learn how to do via the internet. You just have to search and put the time in. And I was talking about the subject got switched over to my kids, and I'm like, I waited so long, and and my dad started talking about YouTube and how some of these people are making millions on YouTube, and I said, it takes. I said, I don't know. I said, I think I'm probably too old for that. And then he said, well, your kids aren't. And I said, yeah. And then I'm thinking, he's kind of right, because I kind of wish some of the kind of my entrepreneurial spirit would kind of rub off on my kids. My daughter has it a little bit, but I don't know, she's kind of super shy and everything, and now she's kind of doing other stuff. But like with my oldest son, he wants to design games and things like that, and he's working on a game. But I'm like, you got to share this stuff. You got to talk about what you're doing. Start now, because if I would have been able to start younger, just think how much further I would be. But yeah, it all boils down to, self-discipline. You can say, yeah, I want to make this game and everything, and work on a little bit here and there while you're spending the bulk of your time just playing games. Or you can, to me, it seems like a lot. For me, it sounds a lot more fun to make a game than to play a game, but that's just me. But I don't know, I don't know what it was. I wish it would have happened for me sooner, but I think my kids in a position right now where, if they start now, who knows, they could make, they could be way ahead of the game. So I don't know. Yeah. I kind of segued a little bit, but.
Well, and I wonder, you bring up some interesting points, and Josh will be able to speak to this more intelligently than me, but some of the points of existentialism kind of come into play, I think a lot of times. And if you look at existentialism, the fact that we're going to die, it comes into play to give life meaning. If life was infinite, if there was no death and we just lived forever, and we just continued to, do whatever we wanted, there'd never be any urgency to anything. But a lot of times I think these kind of hopes and dreams that we tell ourselves that we really care about, they come into focus as we age a little bit and as we've wasted that time. And as we, because I think the same thing, about my daughter. I mean, she's super talented in a number of different areas, and she's 9, and I don't want to be one of those, crazy pushy parents that's like, hey, do this thing or whatever. So I never want to push her. I just try to encourage her to be excited about whatever she happens to be excited about at the time. But, she'll draw for a little bit, and then she'll write for a little bit, and then she'll do gymnastics for a little bit. And it's like she's got, I used to joke that I had like job ADD because I'd last a certain number of years and then just get bored and move on. But she kind of strikes me that way with kind of her hobbies and her interests. And at some point in time in my life, I remember thinking, and I started way later than a lot of artists, but I remember thinking, like, if I don't sit down and commit to something, then I'm going to be mediocre at 100 million different things, and I'll never be good at anything. And so I was actually part of this ukulele club that I founded, and I had to tell everybody, hey, listen, guys, I've got to bow out because I'm going to get into this illustration thing. And I remember all of them were like, that doesn't make sense. Why can't you just have 2 hobbies? And I was like, well, like, I'm actually committing to it. And so, like, I need to, like, prune things out of my life because, if I'm going to be a good ukulele player, then that's what I'm going to do. But if I'm going to be a good illustrator, then that's what I'm going to do. And I think for a certain period of time, it does take kind of a decision and some commitment. And this is why I hate the word passion, is because if you rely on your emotions to tell you what you should do, what you should spend your time on, I think a lot of what you end up doing is going to be fleeting and is going to change frequently. Because I don't always feel like doing, finishing this project that I'm working on, or, whatever. There are parts of it that are not entertaining, that I'm not looking forward to. But if I've committed to doing it, then I'm gonna do what it takes to do it. And so at that point in time, I had to cut that out. Now there's lots of people, like Josh is an example, who, he's in a band and he's an illustrator, and I mean, Scott, you're a good example as well. You're able to juggle multiple things, and I juggle multiple things as well. But I think at some point in time, there has to be that I'm getting older. I have limited time, limited resources, and I've got to decide, like, what I'm going to be into and what I'm not going to be into. And that's one of those things in my life, at least, that, that I'm not that I'm like super morbid or whatever, but I just thought, I could go another 50 years of like flip-flopping back and forth, or, drawing when I feel like it, or, taking a photo every once in a while when I see something pretty. And then I will have amounted to nothing. Like from an artistic standpoint, I'll have nothing to show for, a life of waiting to be motivated by the muses or inspired by the genius or whatever it is. Like, if you don't take action for yourself and make a decision and put yourself on a schedule and say, I'm going to do this, then you're going to be like just like everybody else. So,
yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, Josh, what you thought of that.
Well, so I think I think there's a couple things. I mean, I think one is like kind of like prioritizing and making non-negotiables. So like if you really want to be a cartoonist, like it's as simple as just making that a non-negotiable, and being like, okay, so I'm going to work on this thing this much every day, no matter what. And like I don't know why that's such a heavy concept for people, but I think if you actually allow yourself to do that, and when you have excuses come up, just kind of push them aside and be like, nope, no matter what,
Yeah.
Like It's actually easier than people make it, because the weird thing is, and the funny thing is, when you talk to people who will tell you, well, I just don't have good self-discipline, that's the part that scares them, is like being able to just say, I'm going to do this every day no matter what. And I don't know why that's so scary, because it's literally what it takes.
I have a theory why.
Yeah. And if I can just jump in real quick, I've been doing that with like for the past like month and a half. I think I've been like walking like 5 miles a day, in addition to jogging 6 days a week actually, and then jogging like a couple miles a day in the morning. And I was already doing the couple miles, but I started adding the walking, and it's like, yeah, I just got to do it. I got to, and there's usually, and I give myself one day, and it's not the same day. It might be better if it was more regimented, but it's just like, I kind of wait to see what's going on. But if I had already taken that one day off, I got to find time to do it. So, and now it's starting to get hotter. So now I'm going later, and I'm like worried, well, when am I going to, when it starts to get real hot, where am I going to go? But so far it's been, every day, and it doesn't take, it doesn't take that long, but you do it, and it's almost like you can't not do it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just, once you get that habit, it's like, because at first, the first time I went, I can't believe I walked that far. And then, the next day it was like, okay, it wasn't as bad as the first day, or maybe it was worse because your just body's not used to it. But now it's just like, I just have to do it,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of like did the whole or no matter what thing, because when you start, it's not easy, and when you start, everything comes out of the woodworks to stop you from doing it. So by kind of committing to like, as silly as it is, to just be like, I'm going to do this thing no matter what, it like actually forces you to into a mindset of making it work. And I think that's like, I think that's just a conditional thing that like people just have trouble with. But that's a lot of the times, that's like one of the big tricks to relationships too, like friendships, marriages, like just being like, I'm going to make this work, like no matter what.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, by like committing to that, it's like, it's a commitment, and then it works, weirdly enough. But it only works if you actually allow yourself to be committed in a way where you're like, no matter what. And I think that in a weird way, like being an artist is like, is one of those things. And I think physical health is another one of those things where it's like, it's not something that works in like little spits or fits and starts, where it's like, I'm going to change my eating habits for a week or something. That doesn't tend to work. What tends to work is just being like, okay, I'm going to do this thing like Scott was just describing, where it's like, I'm going to run every day, no matter what. And then like when the sun comes or whatever, then you figure it out. You figure out how you're going to navigate that. And of course you're going to have days that you miss. But the point being, like, I think just the idea of committing to it, like that's the thing that bugs me when people, particularly from that conversation, I think this is what rubbed me the wrong way of like, well, I'm not self-disciplined like you. I was like, well, I'm not self-disciplined like me. A lot of it's like an act at first. Like like for me, it was just a realization. I want to be able to call myself a cartoonist every day. And I don't consider myself a cartoonist unless I worked on comics on a daily basis. So I'm like, so that's a non-negotiable. Like if I want to be a cartoonist, I got to work on comics every day. That's it, And
that goes along with this concept of existentialism again, where it's you realize that you exist, then you invent yourself, and then you act accordingly. And so, like if as soon as you realize that you are an individual that can make choices, and you can have actions based on your choices, and that you control ultimately what's going on in your life to a certain extent, in the face of absurdity and other people's choices and things like that, then what you do is you say, I'm a cartoonist. Okay, so what do cartoonists do? Well, they cartoon every day, right? That's it, right? And so if you cartoon that day, then you can call yourself a cartoonist. That's it. And it's kind of an interesting thing that you just invent who you want to be, and then you act accordingly. And then because you are acting that way, you're judged by your actions. People will see you that way. And so if you act like somebody who is motivated because you do things, then not only will you be motivated because you're doing things, but you'll be seen as somebody who is motivated. And it's almost a little backwards. It's like all the things where somebody has this overnight success and all of a sudden they're a millionaire, or all of a sudden they have, 50,000 followers on YouTube, or all of a sudden they have a published book or something. It's like, wow, that happened so fast. They came out of nowhere. And it's like, well, you're just seeing the results of that work, the actions that person decided. Some time ago, 10, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, they decided that they were going to do a thing, and they began doing that thing. They decided, I'm going to be this, and they acted accordingly. And then the natural results of acting that way, people notice those results and assume that the results are because of something beyond their control, when in actuality, all you have to do is just decide, I am this, and then act that way, and then you will garner those results. One thing that you brought up that I find really interesting is I think people's self-identity becomes a problem. So if you say, I'm going to do this, and then you don't do it, what does that make you? By definition, you're a liar. And people don't want to be a liar. That, or you're a fool, or you're, whatever, a failure, whatever negative term you want to put on that. When in actuality, we're all like that. We all do one of two things: either aim super high and miss, daring greatly, that type of thing, or fail completely because we don't aim at all, so that we avoid that situation. Either way, you never hit what you think you're going for. And so, but this idea of what if I try and fail, or what if I say that I'm going to do that and then I don't do it, that'll be embarrassing or whatever. What you're actually saying is that the feeling of embarrassment, or the feeling of being labeled as one of those negative things by those that you told that you're going to do that, is more important to you than that thing. It's a law of economics. It's opportunity cost. You've decided that the value of avoiding embarrassment or pain or failure or some external label is more valuable to you than achieving something or becoming someone who can achieve something. It's kind of an interesting thing, because what if I go out and I do that? Like, nobody ever thinks about this type of thing, but what if I say, you know what, I'm going to run a marathon, and then I fail to run a marathon, but I end up building a running habit, and am I a failure? Yes. Am I better off for attempting that thing? Sure. I'm way better off than I was if I didn't. But did I save myself that embarrassment? No, I didn't. I'm still embarrassed that I didn't achieve that thing. But does that mean, is that a fixed point in time that I have to do for the rest of my life? No, I can try again. And so you can continue this effort. And I mean, I think each one of us, anybody who's listening to this, have had times of, productivity and times of slothfulness. And it's kind of this cycle. But if you can just lengthen out those times of productivity and minimize as much as you can those times of slothfulness, and just push through when you're not feeling it, then other people will view you as productive. But I kind of agree. Like, when people tell me like, oh man, I mean, you have a level of productivity that I couldn't even touch. I'm like, I'm not a super productive person. Like, by nature, I would rather take a nap, and I play a lot of video games, and it's not like I, get up early and work out. I mean, by nature, I'm not like massively productive. I didn't just because I remember I was out on a trip with a bunch of faculty, and I had decided at that point in time that I was going to draw at every given opportunity. So I was carrying a sketchbook with me all the time, blah, blah, blah. We're at this guy's house. He's giving us a tour. He's an author, da-da-da-da. Right, we had some downtime before our next meeting, so I sat down and I got out my sketchbook and I started sketching what I was looking at. And I remember this guy who teaches writing, he said, man, I wish I had that. And I said, what? And he said, oh, you just immediately started drawing when you sat down. I wish I was motivated like that. And this is somebody who teaches writing for a living. And I had to pull him up later. I said, hey man, you made that comment. Like, I'm like that because I chose to be like that. I decided before I came on this trip that I was going to draw at every given opportunity that I had. That's not something that just naturally occurs. Like, if you want to write, you write, you just sit down and do it. You decide that if there's a spare moment, that you throw some words on a page. That's all I'm doing. I didn't just magically, I wasn't born this way, you know, like that was a choice that I made that I've followed up on. Every single time I have to make that decision to continue that choice. And he was like, yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's the thing is like, if you're not going to make that choice, take ownership of it, you know, take ownership of the fact that you're not making that choice, but please don't put it on the people who are making the choice to do the work that, you know, like that they're some magical beings that are doing the work. Because once again, it's like, it is a choice. It's a conscious choice. And it's amazing how so much of that stuff is a choice. I mean, like, you know, your viewpoint often is a choice. Like, you know, you're when faced with obstacles and stuff, you can kind of choose to kind of take it in a super negative path, or you can choose to kind of take it in a positive light. And there's times where it feels like that's not even a choice. But what's weird is if you kind of fake it, a lot of the times it does start to actually become reality. And like, this isn't like The Secret kind of thing, because I'm not a big fan of that. That kind of thinking where it's like, if you put, you know, you want something bad enough, it's just going to happen. But if you work towards something, you're definitely making a lot more progress than not working towards it. And the difference between people working towards it and people not is just literally the choice to do it. That's it. That's like the big difference. And it fascinates me that, like, I wouldn't disagree with like what I was being told about being a productive person, because I do work a lot on stuff. But compared to friends of mine, like I feel like very similar to what you were saying, Cory, where it's like I don't view myself as a productive person, but compared to your average kind of person, I am kind of a lot more dedicated to this particular thing. But the only way you do that is just dedicating yourself to it. That's it. It's not. And I think that's the part that is extremely frustrating to kind of see someone not understand. It's like, you know, I think like in this context, it was about like, you know, working out or whatever, which I barely do. And I'm probably one of the least dedicated people to it. I spend like maybe 30 minutes a day on it, but I know people who do like 2 hours at the gym every day, you know, or like Scott was describing, he's like running this, like, I mean, that's harder to do than what I'm doing. But where I got to what I'm doing is I just started doing it and it really sucked. It was not easy and it was terrible. And I totally failed at it for weeks on end until I was like, okay, now I know my posture. Now I know how to like do this thing that I'm doing. And it's like, that's kind of how it starts to build a habit and then become doable. But it's not, it's definitely not a thing of like, I guess the self-disciplined part is, to me, I think it's more of a logical choice of like thinking long-term instead of short-term. Because like the self-discipline is actually avoiding long discipline. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're taking like, you know, even with a comic, right? Like if you carve away at your comics on a daily basis, you're avoiding the total discipline of never seeing your dream fully realized. Like if you really want to do comics, they've got to get done somehow. And if you don't ever work on them, then you're going to end up having the discipline of never having that thing you've desired, right? So that short-term discipline of like doing the work yields like much bigger rewards in the long term. So it's not really self-discipline, it's just logic. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, it's kind of just logic.
No, it totally makes sense. Yeah. I have this question, and this might be where things get a little, I make some assumptions that might be a little insulting to those that have this mindset. But I feel like it's easy, just like it's easy for me to say negative things about somebody who I don't identify with, right? If I can other someone and I can say, oh, it's because they're Jewish or they're black or whatever, right? If I can make them different than me, then I can say and do horrible things. But if I identify with them and I empathize with them, then I can't do that stuff, right? As soon as you get to know someone, then you know that becomes it becomes difficult to hurt them because you're actually hurting yourself, right? No man is an island, that type of thing. I think the reverse of that is also true in that as long as I don't have to identify with Josh, then I don't have to hold myself accountable to the same level of productivity that he holds himself accountable to. As long as I can look at Scott Circland and say, well, he's significantly different than I am, then I don't have to measure up to the amount of productivity that he has. And as soon as I say, and as soon as I admit the only difference between me and this super productive person is that they are making a choice that I can make that I'm currently not making, then I'm ultimately holding myself 100% accountable for not making that choice because there's nothing to stop me. And so I think a lot of what I get from a lot of this is when people come to me and they say, well, I'm just not like you. They're hoping that I agree with them. Because if I tell them, you know what, you're right, you're not like me. You have no reason to hold yourself to this high standard. Then that lets them off the hook. And so there's a little bit of frustration when people say, well, I don't know how you do it. And you just say, well, you could do it. All you have to do is just decide to do it. Oh, I know, but my circumstances are different. Well, they're not, though. They're the same. You and I are in the same boat. And the only thing holding you back is yourself. What that does is it's taking away their excuse. It's taking away their reason for not doing what they want to do, because as long as you are different than them, because you're motivated or you're that type of personality or you're a morning person or whatever it is that they think that they're not, as long as you're an other, then they don't have to identify with you and they don't have to look themselves in the mirror and come to grips with the fact that they've made a series of decisions that have caused them to be where they are today, rather than a determinist factor of like, I am who I am because I was born this way, or I am who I am because I was, other factors beyond my control have caused my situation. Everybody's got externalities in their life, and some of us choose to do something with that, and some of us choose to be done by those things. And I think that's a super harsh reality, is that the only difference between you and everyone else is what you perceive, is how you decide to differentiate yourself from that thing. And so I've met a number of extraordinary people, and every time that I come to get to know them, I find that they are normal people that choose to do extraordinary things. That there actually are no extraordinary people. There are just some people that make extraordinary sacrifices and some people that make extraordinary choices. But everyone's a normal person. Everyone is just like me. And some people make different decisions than I do.
Yeah. 100%.
Scott, what do you think?
I agree. I was just thinking that this is kind of a little bit of a different topic, but to me, sometimes I think it also relates. But you get the comments all the time, like, you're so talented and everything. And now I'm just at the point where it's just like, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. But what you really want to say is, well, yeah, I kind of like work at this. I mean, it just didn't just happen. It's not like I wasn't just born this way. I couldn't just draw out the womb. I had to, practice and stuff. It's like any other thing. If you want to get good at it, you got to put in those 10,000 hours or whatever. So, and in order to do that, it takes self-discipline. I think, some people, they don't want to put in that time, and maybe they don't want it enough.
Yeah, and I wish there were a little more honesty about that in those conversations, because I'd be much more interested in talking to somebody who's like, like I really wanted, like I thought I wanted to be a comic artist, but seeing the amount of work that you do, I don't think it's for me because I don't want to do that work. Like that would actually be a much more interesting conversation for me, because then I'd be like, oh, like you're actually an honest person. You know what I mean? Because that's a more honest conversation. Or somebody who's like, like, yeah, wow, I see you, doing exercise or something like that, but I don't have the willpower to choose to like take the time to get there,
right? Like
where you are. And that's impressive that you've done the work. That's a much different conversation than saying, I'm not self-disciplined like you. Like that feels like a whole different level. And I think that does tie into what Cory was talking about, where it's like, that's just an excuse, And I think that's the thing is like, uh, you know, once again, there's everybody's got excuses. I mean, all three of us have excuses for not being here today. I had a really rough week at work. Scott's got a ton of freelance work to do. Corey's like dealing with being totally sick. We all have excuses,
Yeah.
but we showed up. So, it's just a thing that, to kind of keep in mind is like half of it's just showing up and kind of committing and it's just being like, no, 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 this is what I'm going to do. It's a weird trick, but it's like I don't think it's anything any of us haven't had to do with projects where it's just like you're just like an animation. You're just like I'm gonna make a 5-minute animation. Period.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm gonna do. And then what's weird is you work at it, and then the next thing you know, you might actually have a 5-minute animation
Yeah.
or a 1-minute anime. At least you'll have something, you know. Yeah.
Dylan has an excellent question in the chat.
Cool.
It's Dylan Kohler. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly. He said, "So should we compare ourselves to others, or focus just on oneself and set goals to achieve for oneself?" So the idea is, should we be comparing ourselves to other people, or should we just focus on ourselves? I've got an answer, but I'd like to follow up one of you guys. What do you think to that, Scott?
I'm not so big on comparing. I like the idea of being inspired by others, but not necessarily comparing. I don't know. It's like there's people I look up to, like their business acumen and things like that. But I'm not necessarily comparing myself to them. I'm just inspired by them, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. What do you think, Josh?
I think it's weird because I think what is it? Compare and despair or something like that. There's like a lot of
comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah, comparison is the thief of joy. I mean, I think if you get into the comparison game, it's a really tough game to find fulfilling, because if your fulfillment only comes in comparison to someone else, it's kind of like a view of life where there's winners and losers, and you're only going to be happy if you're a winner. And unfortunately, that's just never going to happen if you compare all the way, because you're like, while I might feel really good about my cartooning, then there's cartoonists out there like I can think of a few, like one of my role models, Chris Ware. And it's like, if I look at my output and start comparing it's like asking to get depressed. And then even if I suddenly somehow level up to where I'm where he is, if I'm then comparing with like, one of the presidents of our countries, or like a great figure in history who like caused massive social change or something like that, then who the hell am I? It's just it's a slippery slope, comparing. So I always recommend not. However, being aware, I think, is important. Like, I think having a real objective awareness of other people's abilities is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like being able to know which wall you stack on as an artist, like kind of like if you view all art as a gallery and you have a certain wall you'd feel comfortable putting your art along with, but then there might be a wall where you're like, what the hell is my stuff doing here? Although frankly, I think that's how most of us feel whenever we put our art next to anyone's stuff.
Yeah.
So awareness is good, but I definitely say I think you do have to find kind of your own goal and your own level of like what you need to accomplish in order to kind of be where you think you need to be as an artist. And I think most of us have pretty high ideals.
Yeah.
For like what we want to get better at and stuff like that. But I definitely would say like the comparison game, it's like I think we do that a lot when we're younger artists. And I know some older artists who do that a ton and are fairly bitter people because of it. And some of them are really talented, but it's like the comparison thing's just like eating them. It's a weird thing to kind of explain.
Yeah. Well,
and I know that happens in like comedy too. Like comedians are like that all the time. Like there's an old school of comedians that would like eat each other alive, and all they do is compare. But what's interesting is you look into like the toxic environment that created around comedy, and it can be it can be like, is it really worth that toxicity to create the art?
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. What's your opinion on it, Corey?
So I look at I look at comparison like a knife or fire, right? It's when used correctly and when following the rules, it can be a super useful tool. But if it's out of control, or if you're not careful with it, it can destroy things. It can hurt you. It can hurt others. And so I kind of take it that way. But I think if you don't ever compare your work to other people's work, then you don't know what you're lacking, and it becomes really difficult to improve because you don't understand what that gap is. But I think as soon as you start comparing yourself to somebody else, you're no longer comparing something objective. You're comparing something subjective, because it's impossible to get an accurate read of another person, and it's impossible to get an accurate read of yourself. Right? Your view of yourself is distorted because it's filtered through your experiences, and your view of other people is distorted because it's filtered through a limited data set. And so you don't have enough experience to know what they have been through, and so you're comparing everybody else's demo reel to the stuff that is on the cutting room floor. But I do think it's useful if you were to say, this is where I find it really useful and like you said, inspiring. If I see someone do something, that means that it's possible for a human to do that thing. And if it's possible for a human to do that thing, then if I'm willing to put in the work, it's possible for me to do that thing.
Yes.
And something that I've seen with students is if I show them someone relatable that has achieved something, they feel like they can do it. If I show them someone that seems untouchable, it just becomes discouraging. And so it's an interesting thing, because if I show them professional work and I say, hey, you guys can do this, they don't believe me. But if I show them professional work and then I show them students that get close to professional work, I'm like, this is some student work that got close to this, then they're like, wow, that was a student and I'm a student, and that means I can do it. If a student did that and I'm a student, that means it's possible. The only difference between me and them is, time and effort. And so, but as soon as you start playing the game of trying to rank things where I'm better than that person or I'm worse than that person, you use it as a way to, give yourself a carrot or make a value judgment or whatever. Then it becomes completely useless, because either way, whether you're putting other people down or trying to build yourself up or tearing yourself down, by building other people up, what you're doing is you're making a useless value judgment of which human being is worth more to society or whatever. And that's irrelevant, beside the point, and nothing good comes from that. But if you can say, like, I can look at a technique that an artist did, I can look at the results of something that they've been able to pull off because of storytelling that they're able to do, or a composition, and I can say, if that is achievable by a person, and I am a person, the only thing that stands in my way is knowledge, work, and effort. And so that means that I could do that if I wanted to. So I find that type of comparison to be really useful, because it shows me where I'm lacking. And if I know what I lack, then I know what I can improve, and I can constantly be doing that. But if I start making that value judgment, like you said, Josh, where I say they did that and I didn't do that, that means I'm a bad person, or that I'm a bad artist, or that they're a better artist than I am, or that whatever. Like, I can recognize that their work at this snapshot in time is better than mine as a judgment of how to close that gap. But as soon as I go into they're a better artist, period, that's a definitive statement that lasts for all eternity, that can never be changed. It's written in stone.
Yeah. And I think to me, the big defining difference, like, because it's hard to measure, especially when you're a young artist and you're putting your work up for critique, and by nature, critiques are done in groups in art schools for a reason, to get a little comparison, because there's a slight bit of friendly competition that's really good in an art school. In fact, I even attribute, like, my wife and I both were in the same class, like in college, and I attribute the advances we made in college to the amazing people we were in school with. Like, the people I went to school with made me a better artist because they were so good. and literally you felt like you needed to keep up. And so it was kind of an interesting thing where it's like we all kind of caused each other to level up. And that's a really positive thing. I'd say the big drawing factor when you're in that situation, like you're, maybe like putting yourself out online and like you're seeing other amazing art out there and stuff like that. I think it would just really come down to like jealousy or envy versus like honest comparison. So like I think honest comparison is not going to be hurtful, but the second it starts being like there's like a jealousy or an envy or an anger or something like that connected to the comparison.
Where you're trying to rationalize or justify something.
Yeah, I mean that becomes like one of those things like I see sometimes in the area I live where like I have a couple neighbors. Everybody has a couple neighbors like this in neighborhoods like mine, where it's like there's a couple neighbors where you can see like one of them like gets a new fence, and then the next person gets like a bigger new fence, and one of them gets like an SUV, and the other one gets like a bigger SUV, and it's just like this stupid war between like these two people kind of trying to face off and like front. Whereas like maybe instead of that kind of method, just being like, my yard could use a fence. Like, it's not, I don't know. I'm just saying there's like unproductive ways of like advancing, and then there's productive ways. And I think, there's healthy competition, and then there's really destructive competition, and sometimes really absurd competition. And I've seen it all in art. And the weird thing is you'll see some really, like I said, there's some really successful artists who are really like comparative and really bitter and like get really mad at artists who are really good, and get really, mad at young artists who are like encroaching on their territory. Like there is that in the art world. So it's, it is something like, I don't know if it'll like take away your success as an artist, because I have seen it be fuel that works quite well for people's art. But I think for their health, like that's a different thing, like their mental health in particular, because the older guys, you usually meet one of two kinds, and one is much more humble and kind of open and usually like really interested and engaged with like what younger artists are doing, and the other is like usually pretty bitter and angry. And it's a weird thing, but it's like when you've met those personalities, them, and for me, that's always a cautionary tale for myself. Whenever I start getting negatively comparative with other people's work, I'll be like, do I want to be that old man who's just like angry and just fueled with rage, or do I want to be like the more kind of humble, peaceful older guy who like the younger artist meets and is like, oh, this guy's really amazing, and you're like, yeah, I'm not that amazing, like I'd rather be on the end of the inquisitive kind of growing artist rather than the bitter kind of. And it's interesting, you can even see it physically a lot in the artists too, because it's affected their health,
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great place to stop. Excellent question, Dylan. But yeah, I agree, and I don't know, I went on a Twitter rant earlier today just talking about just how difficult it is to create, like in the face of all of the obstacles that are stacked up against creation. Like destruction is so much easier than creation, and yet there are some people that choose to create, and if you are making anything, just know that you are in an elite minority of people that are making a choice to create something, and that in and of itself is awe-inspiring. Like no matter where you are in your journey, it's really cool, that you've chosen to do that, because the vast majority of the human race chooses to either destroy or be pacified, and there's very few of us that go out of our way to make the extra effort and sacrifice to create, which is pretty rad. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing this show, because I like meeting like-minded people who are this rare breed who make that choice. Not that we're any different than anybody else. I think anybody could make that choice. But the ones that do set themselves apart because of their actions, and it's pretty cool. So yeah. So Scott, where can we find your stuff and your Kickstarter?
The Kickstarter, I'm pretty sure I can say it on YouTube, even though I don't know if I can say it on Facebook. But if you go to youngandthedead.com, that'll take you right to the Kickstarter. Oh, wait. Yeah, we're on YouTube. No,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's really, there's my website too at Surfworks. But the main thing, which there's a link there too. If you go to Surfworks, there'll be a link right front and center when you get there to take you to the Kickstarter too. But yeah, the Kickstarter is the main thing.
Great. And Josh?
I'm just going to reiterate youngandthedead.com because you guys, we got to get this thing more funded. I mean, it shouldn't be we're moving backwards. Let's move it forward. So let's make that happen, guys.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and I'll say the same thing if you want to go check out my most recent, which is now a week old or so, thing on Instagram. I've got a link to Scott's Instagram there. It's a zombie hand. And you can find so if you follow me at all, go find that zombie hand that I drew recently, and you can click on Scott's thing and then follow it through. But go to youngandthedead.com, and that'll redirect to Scott's thing. Which how much time is left on that, Scott?
As of tomorrow, we will have a week left.
Okay, so it's the final push. Up your pledges, tell your friends, all that jazz, and we'll see you guys in a couple days.
Bye.